I'm calling the December 7th Planning Commission meeting in order at 7 p.m.
Oh, sorry.
November 7th. Thank you. For the audience here tonight, the City of Glendora utilizes a hybrid meeting format to allow participation both in person and virtually. In consideration of others and business conducted tonight, please silence your phones and the electronic devices and refrain from speaking unless recognized. If you are interested in speaking during the public comment, please fill out a speaker card or use your raise hand function icon on the Zoom before the public comment hearing ends. Again, this is a public meeting for the community of Glendora. I appreciate your respect and your participation in this meeting here this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to our Madam City Clerk, and who's going to request a roll call.
Thank you. At this time, I'll conduct an oral roll call and request that each commissioner respond with present when their name is called. Commissioner Crimmins,
Present.
Commissioner Davis,
Present.
Commissioner Koss,
Present.
Vice Chair Faber,
Present.
and Chair Norwood.
Present.
Let the record show all are
Okay.
present.
Okay, and we'll go ahead and I'm just go ahead and lead us in a pledge of allegiance. Please follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Does anyone wish to reorder or add to the agenda? Okay, seeing none. I'm going to go ahead and open the public comment period. I'm going to invite members of the public to address the legislative body. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes, speaking once on both on or off agenda items. If you're in attendance, please fill out a speaker card and submit to the recording administration before the close of the public comment period. Once recognized, speakers should advance to the podium, state your name and the subject matter you wish to discuss. If you are participating via Zoom, select the raise hand icon in Zoom before the close of the public comment period. Once recognized, you will be unmuted. State your name and the subject matter you wish to discuss. Seeing that there are no public comment cards at this time, I'm going to see if we have any via Zoom.
We have nobody on Zoom.
Okay. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the public comment period. So I'm going to invite reports. First, I'm going to invite reports from the Community Development Director, Jeff Kugel, and Assistant City Attorney, Danny Elshire.
No report from me tonight.
Neither from me, thanks.
Okay, seeing that there are no reports, right now we're going to go to invite Principal Planner Hans Friedel to report on an update on SB 9 activity and policy framework.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm here tonight to give an update as requested by the commission on the status and sort of quantity and volume of applications, SB 9 applications we've received to date. And also a little update on our policy framework, which we worked with Planning Commission to develop and it's been working for us, I guess, about a year ago. So for some background for some of the newer members, Senate Bill 9 created new pathways for residential homeowners to create additional residential units in their single family lots, and also split those lots into two portions, roughly proportionate. Took effect January of 2022. Essentially, you can have 4 residential units within the area of the original lot, whether it's split or not. So it's not a pathway to do. Some people think it's 8 homes or something like that. It's always 4 units, but there's like 26 different combinations of ADU, JDU, SB 9 secondary unit, that sort of thing. So in terms of applications, as of mid-September, which is when we compiled the staff report, the city has received and processed 8 SB 9 applications, and that's to date. So that's not just this year, but since January of 2022. These are all for additional units. And then there was a 9th application for a lot split. So we've only gotten one lot split. There's been a couple of folks that have been interested in it and have shown us some conceptual designs and stuff like that. But the lift is a lot heavier for that in terms of engineering and they have to have a surveyor and all that sort of stuff. So it's more money. So most people, and more difficult and takes longer. Most people opt to have what amounts to be a second ADU. And that's so that they can have an ADU, they can have 3 or 4 units. And that's what most people are doing. Staff is directed by Planning Commission and City Council to continue with the policy and not adopt an SB 9 ordinance. We have continued to improve and make minor revisions to the policy, and it seems to have been effective. We do things like clarifying the graphics. If there's some confusing language that seems to be a sticking point at the counter with folks, we'll play around with how we word it and stuff like that so that it makes more sense. And so it's been evolving, and the feedback has been good. I've heard through some of my colleagues, there have been multiple cities, including one of the biggest counties in the state of California, have looked at our policy as an example. So I think it's actually been pretty cool that Glendora, I think we did pretty good with it. Our current thinking is that rather than adopt an SB 9 ordinance, we'll handle SB 9 units through revisions to the current code. And we're going to talk about a little bit of that tonight. And at the next Planning Commission meeting, but especially an update to the ADU section of the code. Most of the SB 9 unit conversations happen, somebody comes to the counter and they want to do an ADU, or they've heard somewhere that they can do 2 ADUs or something like that. And then we start talking about SB 9. And so it makes, other than the lot split stuff, which as you've seen, we've only done 1 in 2 years, and it's not even approved yet. So it's in process basically. And we will revise that at some point in the future with our subdivision standards. We think that basically by considering and thinking about secondary SB 9 units, something like the ADUs, that they basically are ADUs, we can pick and accommodate them, pick them up in an update to our ADU code, which we have to do anyway because it's out of compliance with state law. So that's kind of what we were thinking. In the future, we'll have to update some other provisions of our code and stuff to basically make these, to fully accommodate SB 9 applications in the zoning code. Until then, the policy is what we're using. So I'm just curious to hear if you think this is you support this approach, and any questions, happy to answer any questions or hear any thoughts you have on it.
Thank you, Hans, for the report. I will, seeing this is not a public hearing, I just want to confer that we can ask questions regarding his report.
Yes, yeah, you can. I mean, I wouldn't go into too much substance, but yeah, you can ask questions. And
Okay. And I will start with Commissioner Crimmins, if you have any questions for Hans.
I don't know if you can answer. It's a little arbitrary, but the number of applications, is that higher than you would have expected, lower than you would have expected?
Well, I would say maybe even a little bit lower. How many ADUs do we do a year? 40-ish?
40 to 50.
So we process 40 to 50 ADU applications a year, and the SB 9s are usually, because it's expensive to build an ADU now. It's, garage edition is $100,000 or something. So, for those that want to have they think, oh, I can do 2 ADUs, then that conversation happens. But, SB 9 ADUs, I'd say every so many ADU people at the counter ask about SB 9. So I'd say 8's pretty low. I would have expected that we would have had more lot split applications by now. But that's a complicated process, and it's expensive to get a surveyor and engineering team to do that. So that, if anything, I'm surprised that we've only had 1.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the information.
Okay, Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, a couple of things. How has the parking in these shaken out so far?
Well, so far, and I might have glossed over this, but I think that only 2 of the 8 SB 9 applications have been finalized and approved. So we have, of the 8, there are others that are in process. We've had 2. There's one up the street somewhere here, and I don't want to say that specific address, but it's pretty close to here.
I see.
And because SB 9, doesn't require it does allow us to require, I should say, the additional parking for it. Whereas the ADUs, we can't require parking. With the SB9 secondary units, we do make them show a parking space for the other unit. So this place, the one that is finished that I know about, has more parking than we would require. So they've got the 4 units or 3 units. I think it's 3. And you could probably park 5 cars, 6 cars there. It's got a huge driveway and like multiple spaces, even like carved out, like curbed and painted. So it's almost like a little apartment. So they can definitely handle a car or more per unit on site.
I guess as a follow-up to that, I would like to see some emphasis. I don't know how much emphasis is put on it across the counter or during the approval process. Whatever we can do to not allow them to push cars out onto the street, I would like to see us approach and be as firm as we can possibly be legally. I think that's the biggest drawback for me, is pushing cars out onto the street. It just makes for, to me, sloppy looking neighborhoods.
One thing that we do emphasize at the counter, over the phone or via email, I mean, people talk to us different ways, is that Glendora doesn't really allow on-street parking overnight. There's a permit process at the police you have to go through. And so we really encourage them to think about where people will park on site. And the same with ADUs. Like, we can't require parking on ADUs, but we still have that conversation.
So
And
if
most
it-
people do provide parking for their ADUs.
Okay, so if they didn't provide parking, the tenant or the homeowner, whoever was living there, and their car was pushed out onto the street as a function of it, they would have to get a overnight parking continuously from the police department?
It's like a tag. Yeah, you pay a fee and there's a form over there. I actually looked into it for myself.
That
a couple
monthly,
years ago.
yearly?
I think it's, I don't remember. I don't think it's monthly. I think it's good for like a year or something.
Okay,
But
alright.
when I started to fill out the form, I was looking for myself. I didn't remember seeing that it was a monthly renewal. It's you pay a fee and you show them where you're going to live and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So I imagine it's good for some period of time.
You mentioned no ordinance. Is that something we voted on, no ordinance, just to go with the? Okay. What would an ordinance look like or have looked like as opposed to what we're doing now?
Well, one of the things, it's a good question. And one of the things we did is, when we worked with the city attorney's office and crafted our policy, we sort of wrote it as if it was an ordinance. So the policy looks a lot like an ordinance. I mean, it's got some graphics and it's like a handout, but if you read it, it's basically an ordinance. So the substance of it, the policy direction, what sizes we allow, the setbacks, all that stuff, probably wouldn't really be different had we done an ordinance. What we're proposing doing, and I think what makes the most sense, is to pick up the extra dwelling units in the revision to the ADU section of our code, because we treat the extra SB9 units like ADUs in terms of size and setbacks, and the state does too. They basically treat them like an ADU. So it'll be partially in the updated accessory dwelling unit code, in the zoning code, where it'll talk about the regulation. So we'll take from the handout, and that will become part of the ADU code, basically. And then at some point in the future, when we update our subdivision standards, we'll pick up that there's this new administrative lot split. There's a type of, a resident can split their lot, but it doesn't go to planning commission or city council or anything. They just go straight to like a final map. And we'll have to somehow put that in the code. But like I said, we've only done one, and they haven't even been able to finish that. So for us, I think the first step will be picking up in code the extra dwelling units, which most people do. They don't split their lots, they just add dwelling units.
And those all work towards our RENA numbers, correct? Okay. How do we compare with other cities? Any idea?
I don't know.
Similar like for like communities.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers. I know, like, sometimes we get calls from San
Okay.
Dimas, and I don't feel like they've done hardly any. I know, like, I saw somewhere, it was maybe Skag or something. LA County's done quite a few lot splits in the county. So I don't know, it was like 100 or something, I don't think that Riverside County had done any lot splits as of a couple months ago. I'd heard through the grapevine. So I think those are the rarer ones depending on the jurisdiction, but there's definitely extra SB9 units in places. I just don't know the numbers for all the
Right,
neighboring
right.
cities. Yeah.
You may or may not know this, but a lot of Glendora is, from my understanding, off limits along the foothills fire zone 4 areas. Is that, am I stating that correctly? It's you can't put an ADU up in the fire zone 4 area.
So the very high fire hazard severity zones is defined by CAL FIRE, which are basically along the hills. We prohibit ADUs and SB9, and we can SB9 secondary or lot splits, any sort of SB9 applications, unless that lot, the carve out is that it's fully mitigated and it's served by a city, a street, public or private, that meets city standards. And that means it's 26 feet wide, paved, et cetera. A fire truck can get up it.
Right.
And so the problem in the hills, many of those houses in the hills are up private drives that are nowhere near 26 feet wide, 18, 20. So that person, to get that extra unit, that homeowner would have to widen the street for like half a mile through the hill. It would be millions of dollars.
Right.
So that, if anything, that just makes it almost impossible for those homes up higher in the hills to do ADUs and secondary.
And that's basically
under the current
entire-
code.
Basically the entire swath north of Sierra Madre, more or less.
Yes, under the current code. The city could revisit that in the future, but the state allows us to prohibit them in those very high fire zones unless fully mitigated. SB9 has the extra thing that we don't have to allow them, and we don't in historic zones, historic designated properties, which doesn't apply to ADUs. And like floodplains and in critical wildlife habitat stuff. So there's a few other carve outs for SB9.
So we've
Yeah.
we've self-limited as a function of our locale.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the ones that we have received, are they all owner occupied, owner replied?
Well, so only in the lot split is the affidavit required for them to live there for 3 years, to agree to live there. And then that applicant absolutely filled out the affidavit and did all that stuff. But it's not a requirement for the extra units. So it's not something that's really we're going to ask, because we can't say no whether they live there or not.
Yeah. And then
We do limit them to short term. There's no short term rentals and stuff though. We still have that 30-day, prohibition of, at least term has to be at least 30 days, that sort of
Right.
stuff. So they're not like they shouldn't be on the Airbnb market.
and then my last question is, they just passed a law or a bill that they can sell these things as individual units like condos now. How do you see that affecting how we approach
So-
things, or?
My understanding, and I'm happy to have our attorney chime in on this, but that's an optional provision for cities and jurisdictions to opt in. So the jurisdictions are now local agencies in parlance, are allowed.
That's right. It is an opt-in.
They're
deal.
allowed
Yeah.
to allow that, basically. So if we
Right.
don't want to do that, we don't have to.
Do we have a stance on that as of today?
I've received direction on.
No, we haven't. I've had any official word from the council or anybody else whether or not the city wants to do something like that. I mean, it's certainly something that if the planning commission wanted to, it could take up. But it's not something the city has to do.
Yeah, I think sooner or later it's going to find us one way or another. So I think maybe down the road, we should probably agendize that somehow to have a further discussion on that with some backup ground material for it, and pros and cons either way. Do I need to make a motion for that?
No, what?
No, you should not.
And we're also talking about maybe in the beginning of the year, maybe doing a introduction to some of what these housing laws are.
Okay.
And that might be something we can discuss at that point.
There are 57 new housing laws that went into effect this year. And so most of them, from like a cursory review that we've done, I don't think are going to require big local changes. A lot are very specific, or they relate to state financing or the Bay Area or stuff like that. But there's a handful of ones that could, or potentially in this case, optionally impact us. And so we would talk about those at that overview.
Yeah, so 57 of them is my rationale for saying we should all go to the planning commission conference in Long Beach. There's plenty going on that,
I'll add on the new laws, just so you know. So the California League of Cities does a legislative recap update, and they usually record it. So I'm gonna sit in on it and listen to it. They usually do it for staff across the state, and then they make it available to the public afterwards. So that's in a couple weeks. So we'll hear a recap as to what the League of Cities take on all these new laws are.
Commissioner Koss.
All right, I think Commissioner Davis asked most of the ones I was going to ask, but that's okay. I also agree with him that I think we should take up in some capacity that particular question we were talking about, about whether or not we're going to allow that opt-in, opt-out. Question about this though, I see on the chart you gave us, it says 9 SB 9 applications and then 8 ADUs, 1 completed, but it also says that 1 was canceled. Do we know, did the owner cancel that or what happened with that?
They probably did. We pulled this from our building permit software. So I think actually it's funny when I was looking through this. So in addition to the one that was canceled, you'll see that 2 of these are for the same address. There's like an address that repeats on here. So they must have withdrawn. So they canceled the Woodland one and then they resubmitted that. It looks like is permit 46, which is like 2 down. So that stuff happens. They submit them. We have post entitlement phase checklists now, and invariably there's revisions required and stuff. And so then we'll ask for those revisions, and sometimes they're pretty quick and they resubmit, and other times they go away for a year. We don't hear anything back. And sometimes they cancel or withdraw or whatever. Yeah.
And I know you asked earlier about whether or not we think you should continue to handle it the way you've been handling it or change it. And basically, I think if what we're doing is working and it's efficient for you and it's efficient, it's not unduly onerous for the homeowner, then yeah, I think we should continue until we see a need to change things, right? If if it's not broken right now, don't fix it, is my opinion. I think if more of these come in, then we might need to reevaluate that. I was also kind of surprised. I know you said this list is from when? January of 23?
No, that went into effect. SB 9 went into effect January of 2022. And so this is everything between January of 2022 and like when I did the staff report was like September.
So basically almost 2 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much. Yeah.
So I'm actually surprised too, because I know when it first went into effect, what was in my head was that everybody was going to be wanting to do this. And so I'm actually kind of pleasantly surprised that we're seeing such a small number, which is kind of nice.
I think you could thank interest rates for that a little bit. It's very hard to.
So I just wanted to mention, I know Commissioner Davis mentioned parking. I agree with that. I think we should do everything that we can to discourage having cars parked on the street. Not only does it look bad, it's hard when you're pulling out of a lot and there's cars parked on the side of the street, it really causes problems for, visual and seeing around them. So I highly recommend that we do that. What was my other question? Oh, the very high fire zones. So there's no question that somebody who lives in that zone absolutely can't do that. Or is that something where
it's not, it's as we, it's kind of, as I stated, it's unless it's fully mitigated and served by a city street or a street that meets city standards, whether that be public or private. And there are some up the hill, on the hills, many of those private drives are not 26 feet wide for some portion. And so it pretty much is a no, it's impossible. But there are portions of the city further down that are in Glendora's grid of city streets, or they have private streets that are wide that are in the very high fire hazard severity zone, but those lots are served by a 26-foot or greater city street.
Nice. And
they're developed. And so in those homeowners, we would allow them to do this.
Okay.
ADUs, SB 9, whatever. It's those ones that are up those private drives that it's infeasible to widen the street that long.
And I think when you talk about fully mitigating the fire danger in those high fire zones, is that even technically possible? I mean, look at the recent fire. Anyway, that's another issue. But, and then my understanding is that, of the whole SB 9 also is that, it doesn't apply to like HOAs or things where, do they have the ability to say, no, we don't want that? Or do they have to, like, if a person wants to do it, like if you're in a single family house that's part of an HOA, do they have to allow that as well?
That's a good question. For the attorney, my understanding is that when SB 9 was enacted, it's been a couple of years since I've looked at the actual law. It did not prohibit HOAs from preventing SB 9 units, but I think with ADUs, it's a little different story.
Yeah, with ADUs, I think it's different, but I don't offhand recall whether SB 9 allows homeowners unit associations to basically I can't imagine that they could.
Yeah, and as I recall, there were some types of setback requirements. There were still setback requirements for the ADUs that, depending on the size of the lot, some of the smaller ones might not. That might,
Yeah.
in terms of the setback.
Yeah, you can convert garages, things like that, to ADUs. The setbacks for SB 9 and ADUs are 4 feet, 3 feet if detached under the current code. We'll propose making it all 4 feet. We'll do that tonight. But yeah, and there's certain places where just the configuration, like some of the new subdivisions, the lots are very small and the houses are kind of big on those lots. It'd be really hard to do this. Like
Right.
you certainly couldn't split the lot unless you ran it through the house.
Right.
So
Okay.
some of them don't lend themselves to this.
And you said we still have that 30-day, that if somebody's renting, it has to be a minimum of 30 days. And that will continue. Okay. All right. That's it for my questions.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Faber.
Yep. Thank you very much for the presentation. Just two things. I think the policy formwork looks good. I would say keep with that and don't make it an ordinance till you really need to. Seems like it's very informative, and as you go through it, should be good. It sounds like it's working too, so that's good. The second question I had just came through the discussion. So on the page 3 of the policy formwork, the 5th one over on the top right shows the primary dwelling and an ADU. And just for me, I guess I don't understand, because you talked about ADU permits, but then SB 9 permits. What would be the reasons why you would get one or the other in that instance? Is there?
Yeah, basically SB 9 allows for there to be, and some of this is kind of interchangeable stuff, because that, as I mentioned, our standards for like an ADU and an SB 9 unit are pretty much the same, except for the parking, what we can require for parking. This was to show, and this is for, communicating with customers who don't know anything about this at the counter. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves. It shows basically every configuration that we can think of additional dwelling units that a homeowner can do on their lot if they don't split it. And so one of those is just a house and an ADU. It's a house and a secondary SB 9 unit. There's like 20, there's, attached or detached. It's like the probability game, it just gets higher and higher. And then there's the weird ones where like there's the duplex with 2 ADUs, and because that then falls under the state multifamily housing law, which allows 2 ADUs for what they consider a multifamily, a duplex. So this is pretty much everything you can do in any attached or detached combination on a lot in a single family zone that's not in an unmitigated high fire zone.
So if you were to do that one that we talked about, if I came in, I was the homeowner, would you just say get an ADU permit, or would you say get the SB?
We leave it up to them. Most people just opt to do ADUs. One really important thing, and I'm not the authority to speak on this, our building official would be, but I do know this. The state basically allows, they have some relief for ADUs in terms of like sprinklering and stuff like that. So the building code's a little different. They can be made a little less expensive. That does not apply to SB 9 units. So that's one thing right away that makes an ADU. That might be another reason for the 8 applications, is that the SB 9 units are a lot more to build. There can be more to build. So that it's basically shows them their options. We talk about parking, but as I had mentioned, almost everybody, even with ADUs, shows parking for more than 2 cars on their site, because they realize to be marketable, they have to have some parking.
Thank you.
Okay, so the only question I had was, you talked about when they sell the lot with an ADU on it and they split it, like you said, like similar to like a condo. I was a little confused on that. Would that be done at the sale, or is that done almost, because I mean, isn't it split into two different lots, almost like an SB 9?
Well, that's that. I think you might be referring to the new state law that allows folks to sell,
And you talk about opting
into
yeah.
allowing condos to be ADUs to be sold separately. That would be something like a condo map, and there's probably some minimum lot size things in there and stuff like that. That's not part of our SB 9 thing. This lot split is they can split a single family lot roughly into 2 equal portions. The ratio is 40 to 60. Nothing can be smaller than 40% basically of those portions. And that's when that owner occupancy affidavit comes in, and they have to have at least one dwelling on each lot, primary dwelling, and then they can have an extra unit on that each lot.
So if we
before.
opted in, then.
But we have to do that. We don't get to opt in. The SB 9 is,
When I get it for the ADU.
yeah.
So if we opted into that provision, the homeowner could essentially sell those as two separate properties.
That's it.
An urban lot split.
Okay,
It's another way of doing it, kind of.
okay.
Like, but like a
So it's-
condo version of this.
They've snuck another little wrinkle into the whole lot split. I mean, because the ADU, I always assumed it was under one ownership. It was under one property owner. It would not be split into two. It was part of the property value. If the property owner sold as 2 units on a lot, but we haven't opted into that, and that's up to
No, we wouldn't let somebody.
the policymakers within the city.
That's correct. We would not, under our current policy code, whatever, we would not allow somebody to do that if we, knew about it happening. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the last question I have, there's a couple ADUs I've seen up going near in my neighborhood, and I noticed that the ADU actually ended up with they requested a separate address. So so the separate address doesn't trigger anything as far as additional parking, anything like that. It's just they applied for a second address so that the mail goes into a different location than the.
Yeah,
than the
utilities, it's good that they have their own addresses for health, safety stuff, fire, police, that kind of thing. It's good that they know who lives or where somebody lives, that kind of thing. But it doesn't change our standards for parking or design or anything like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. So
I just have one more. When they split a lot, or add an ADU, how does the city deal with, like, say there's a giant oak tree, hundreds of years old, and they want to cut that down and put an ADU back there? What's our stance on, cutting trees down to make way for?
Well, you have to follow, the city has adopted an urban forestry manual, and it does talk about if you remove trees, replacing them on site. It becomes a little bit tricky with ADUs because you can't require that they pay development impact fees. So they wouldn't do that. I think we would, if that happened, you encourage them not to take out the 100-year-old oak tree. But I don't believe there's no regulation. The city doesn't have an oak tree protection ordinance.
No, and our forestry manual only is triggered for discretionary actions, not ministerial.
Oh, that's right.
And so
That's right.
over the
Right.
counter permits like an ADU are ministerial, and our urban forestry requirements don't get triggered. So in theory, that
Cut it
oak tree
down
could be
and
cut down and you could build your ADU.
We don't have any way to really prevent a homeowner from removing a tree for any reason.
I always thought we had an oak tree preservation.
Good to keep them for.
No, the city does not have a preservation ordinance.
Oh, okay.
So, and just when you're in a CAL FIRE Zone 4, that covers quite a large area. That doesn't necessarily mean every residence within that Zone 4 is considered a high fire hazard area. I mean, Zone 4 can come all the way down to parts of Foothill because some of these maps are antiquated that CAL FIRE has done. At least I've seen them in certain jurisdictions I've worked at where the Zone 4 area is not always coinciding, or how they'll determine through I think it's FRAP, or something they call it.
I know that CAL FIRE, they recently updated the maps in the last couple of years. So you know how you used to have those grade, they used to be the
Mhm.
dark red, the yellow and the orange. They eliminated the yellow and the orange and it's just the dark red areas that they
Well,
adopted.
that could stand corrected there, because I
So-
know, at least in the jurisdiction I worked at, some of the higher fires, the zone 4 area went down to parts of the jurisdiction, and you're like, you know, it would have to be Armageddon for the fire to blow through there, and
It has to be the
Right.
very high.
Yeah,
So the
very high.
high,
Yeah.
you know, and so we use GIS or geographic information systems. And so we're able to overlay that very high zone and see if somebody's parcel or house or whatever, when they come in at the counters in it. And then that's part of our review of a
Okay.
permit.
And you can go on the CAL FIRE website. You can look at the maps there. too.
right. No,
Anybody can.
yeah.
It's every 10 years that they
It's-
update them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, with that said, since there's no vote to take place on this particular issue, thank you for the presentation and the information. Appreciate it. And we're gonna move to a public hearing.
I think you gotta move to receive and file.
Okay.
the report.
Then I will take a motion to receive and file.
I will move.
All right,
Second.
first by Commissioner Cost, second by Commissioner Davis, and we'll do a roll call.
Costs. And then Davis.
Yes.
Second.
Yes.
I'll conduct an oral roll call. Commissioner Crimmins,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Costs,
Yes.
Vice Chair Faber,
Yes.
Chair Norwood,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
It's not showing up on the screen when you do it here.
Okay. So we're gonna go to a public hearing. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Glendora, California, amending certain sections of Title 20 subdivisions and Title 21 zoning of the Glendora Municipal Code in order to implement various housing production actions from the 6th RENA cycle from 2021 through 2029. General Plan Housing Element Project PLN 23-0016. I'm gonna again invite Principal Planner Hans Friedel to report.
Thank you, Chair and Commission. We test my clicker out here. Okay, we're here tonight to present these multiple items. Really, it's like 17, which were commitments made in the adopted housing element. Just by way of some background, the city adopted the 6th cycle housing element December 13th of 2022. It was subsequently certified by the state just this year. The housing element itself has, let me advance the slide, goals and policies that address Glendora's housing needs. The goals and policies are implemented through a series of housing programs that comprise the specific actions the city has committed to take to implement said housing element. HCD certification as a housing element is contingent upon Glendora continuing to implement the programs and action items that we're committed to in the plan. This proposed ordinance is the second package of code amendments to be processed in accordance with the housing element. The first was an ordinance amending the Glendora Municipal Code and the official zoning map. That was the rezoning a few months ago that we were here for. It was adopted in July of 2023, and that was ordinance 2077. Program 16, table 41 of the housing element contains a matrix of 31 housing production action items constituting a series of code revisions and programs to facilitate housing production and to promote economic development. Really, these are ways to streamline the development of housing in response to the perceived housing crisis in the state of California. These were agreed on by the Planning Commission and City Council and debated and discussed at their meeting in April. There was a joint meeting of Planning Commission and City Council in April of 2022. And that whole meeting was basically making that table. So for the benefit of some of our newer members, there was a big discussion and between Planning Commission and City Council, we went through all these different potential action items, and the 31 that made it through that meeting were the ones that we're now in the process of implementing through a series of code amendments. This ordinance implements 17 of the first 20 of those 31 action items from that program 16 table 41. We really tried to group these by sort of ease of amendment And, some of the required items in the future are going to require, a lot more research, thought, effort to sort of implement and figure out how to do it. These ones were fairly straightforward. Were pretty verbatim what was in the housing element. So, our job with this batch was to implement what was committed to. So what I'll do is my PowerPoint basically contains every one of these 17 action items. So what I would like to do is skip to the end. And then if there are specific questions, we'll come back and discuss each of these versus me reading every single one of the housing items. I do think we're probably going to have a discussion on some of the revised setbacks, which is slide 9. I'm happy to come back to that. We can do that now. So that's what we're here to do tonight. There are 17 items. These are the first 17 from the first 20 in the table. In summary, fully implementing the housing element programs and action items will require additional code updates in the future, which we'll be here for. One of those I was talking about was the ADU update, which will come in the future, near future. This will probably constitute the single largest package of implementation measures. So tonight, this batch of 17 is, more than half of 30. So it's our biggest batch. And some future program action items, such as allowing residential on religious sites, things like that, are going to be a little more complex and require some study and research to be able to amend. So these were the more like verbatim, pretty straightforward ones. With that, we recommend approval of this, and happy to answer questions and then go back to the different slides and talk about specific ones as questions arise. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. I will go ahead and open the public hearing. I'm going to invite members to give testimony. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes, speaking only on this agenda item. If you are in attendance, please fill out a speaker card and submit it to the recording administration before the close of the public comment period. Once recognized, speakers should advance to the podium, state your name and subject matter you wish to discuss. If you are participating via Zoom, select the raise hand icon in Zoom before the close of public comment period. Once recognized, you will be unmuted. State your name and subject matter you wish to discuss. I'm going to invite speakers here in the audience for public comments, and seeing none, we will move on and inquire if we have any Zoom participants that wish to partake.
We have none.
Okay. Seeing no Zoom participants, we're going to go to discussion and deliberation from the commissioners. I'm going to go ahead and start with Commissioner Crimmins.
Excuse me. Thank you for the information. The one here that I just would like for you to explain so that I can understand it a little more easily is number 17. The wording there, it kind of like wraps my head in a pretzel.
Okay, so this, and Mark, if you want to jump in on this one too, this is giving the city a little bit more flexibility and non-conforming lots. So a non-conforming lot is a lot that's out there that doesn't meet the city standards, our current zoning code. So like we might have like a minimum lot size of so many square feet or something. And here's an older lot that predates our current code, and it's going to be, let's say, smaller. So the old code, it was harder to do something on that lot because it doesn't conform with the current code. This is one of these actions. This one in particular is saying the current code doesn't allow a lot line adjustment unless the resulting lot is within 10% of those requirements in the zone. So 10% of the size or area. That makes it hard on some of the older, some of the smaller lots along like Arrow Highway, Route 66, whatever, for someone to develop and produce housing or do something. It's just another constraint. And so this sort of releases that 10% requirement.
To elaborate on that, most cities have a more conforming requirement standard, is that one or both of them don't comply, but your end result of the adjustment is they're going to be better than they were. They're closer to being into conformance. With this 10% limitation on it, that's just a Glendora own code, it prevented or was an obstacle for a lot of parts of development applications from occurring. So by eliminating that, it will give everybody more flexibility and allow more to happen.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Koss, questions or comments?
Oh, sorry. I guess it helps if you turn your mic on, right? Yes, I did have a question about, it was number 12, I think. Oh, no, I'm sorry, number 16. Eliminating the 20 feet height maximum for multifamily housing that is within 40 feet of a single family zone. I remember when we had that meeting and I remember talking about all these, but can you kind of refresh my memory what would be an example of that?
Yeah, so one of the things here that the state housing and community development's interested in is sort of fairness and this idea that like if you allow if you allow single family houses to do something or be a certain height or have, but you don't allow multifamily to do that, that could be perceived as unfair to multifamily housing or housing development. So in this case, Glendora allows single family houses to be 25 feet tall. Of course, there's a discretionary DPR process they go through to do a second story, but it limited multifamily, which is more units, denser, that sort of thing, to a lower height maximum if they're within a certain distance. So I think the thinking there was to make that the same as it is for single family. So it's not perceived as unfair or a barrier to multifamily. So it's 25 feet for single family. It's 25 feet for multifamily, regardless if it's in that buffer. Multifamily can go higher than that in certain places, but it takes that within 40 feet and just makes them the same as a single family house, not shorter or lower.
What was the rationale in the first place for having that lower requirement for the multifamily?
Oh.
Was there a reason originally for that?
That provision in the code predates me. I know that historically, going back several decades, that there was a lot of, I think, policy discussion just about having anything within a single family zone or near a single family zone that was more than one story. And I think this provision sort of emanates from that kind of thinking that was a topic of a hot debate a couple maybe going back to the 80s and 90s about how high buildings should be. And I think also probably efforts to thinking that if assuming, I think the assumption was 30 years ago that most single family homes were only going to be one story, like a ranch style home, which is the prevalent architectural style in the city, or at least was when most of the homes were built, at least. That if you had a multifamily building next to it, that making it a little bit shorter than 25 feet would provide some sort of aesthetic quality of
Advantage.
goodness, for lack of a better word.
Right. Yeah.
The thing that the most recent application of this was, which it wasn't applied very often, was that 1620 South Glendora one, which came before you guys maybe 2 years ago now. And the end result of that was a flat architectural style that was, what many would argue was not compatible with the architect. Many people said, hey, that's a foreign roof style to the neighborhood. And that was the only way to make it compliant.
That was the one with the flat roof that we found not.
Yeah. But then at the meeting, we kind of said like they have to because the code told them to.
Right.
So by eliminating that, they could actually now be able to play with the roof style to make it like a gable roof or something.
Good, because I remember that. And I remember we said that was not the most visually pleasing. One other question that I had regarding signage, and I remember when we talked about these two. Item 5, eliminating the very large posted sign. And there was another sign one too.
Mhm.
Forget which other sign one was.
Yeah, that's action.
What was the other sign
5,
too?
and it was the signage.
Yes,
It's
3, the threshold for large posted notification signboards to projects greater than 10 residential units. I know that in our discussion, we talked about, yes, making it easier for the person that's building, but we also talked about kind of more public knowledge of what's going on. And so what was I'm trying to remember what our rationale was for eliminating some of those.
So for this one, for action item 3, you'll see this number pop up quite a bit, this 11 or, 1 to 10 or something throughout this code update. And what happened, and that actually ties, so I'll show you, that ties to required action 2, our first one of the night, which is that increasing the threshold for discretionary review, which is planning commission, for multifamily units to above 10. So the idea in the old code is if you're going to have a public hearing for some project, then you do all this noticing stuff. We mail notices, we put signs up, we put ads in the paper, we put signs on City Hall and all that kind of, that kind of stuff. But from now in this code update, multifamily projects from 1 to 10 units are going straight to building permit.
Oh.
Just like, so there's really no point to notice. It would be like as if we notice for ADUs or something, and
I
it
see.
invites public participation in something when there's no forum for that or hearing for it.
Right, because even if the public participated, it would be a moot point.
It's frustrating.
Right.
Yeah, because they
Okay.
they don't have a way to impact the outcome because it just has to meet building code and our objective design standards, which we're working on.
And that was the same rationale for action 5, correct?
This one's a little different. No, yeah, this would,
It seems like that would be the same rationale.
yeah, I think this one might have an error in it, but this one basically is if we amend the general plan to increase housing density, then we don't have to post signs.
Okay.
And that got us on the last rezoning we did where we had to notice it was like 6,000 property owners. That cost, just the mailing was like, I want to say it was like what, $10,000 or something, or it was about $10,000. If we had to put signs on next to all those 6,000 parcels, if we even have permission or a way to do it, because a lot of it's like pavement and stuff like that,
Right.
it would be, a fortune for the city and it would stop the city from being able to do that, or an applicant.
So
this-
these types of things, I think what we were trying to do is to really, I hate saying this, but when I first got here, or even is like, oh, Glendora makes it so difficult to get a permit and to build. And some of these regulations regarding the noticing and the high threshold for review, I think were part of the reason why Glendora had that reputation. So be it. The community wanted to closely scrutinize, everything that happened, however small, and set the threshold low for public hearings and review. But now with with the state really trying to get the city to facilitate housing development and how difficult it was to get the housing element approved and to demonstrate that we were doing things to facilitate housing development and to remove barriers to housing development, such as excessive noticing, excessive number of public hearings for projects and things that should be done ministerially, because if it's consistent with the code, you're always going to have people come out to be against,
Right.
Housing. And so,
Blocks their view. And
right.
such.
Or
right.
yeah, there's too much traffic, whatever it is.
Right.
It's usually revolving around the same things. I mean, all of you have been on the commission long enough to know what those things typically are. So this is an effort, and we had that big long meeting and went through the state and got this approved, just to really remove all of those things. And that includes the noticing and all the public hearings.
We still have the noticing and requirements though for the other projects, correct? That particular noticing hasn't changed.
Yes. So actually the distance noticing, we went from our noticing exceeded the
Right.
minimum legal threshold. Most cities that were 300 feet for a public hearing. We were 500 feet. So we've gone down to 300 feet.
That's what I thought.
Right.
We put it to where the legal threshold is, right? now.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Those were my only questions. I think, by the way, I do want to say this. I know this was a lot of work and I appreciate the amount of effort that went into that. So thank you.
Commissioner Davis.
The 300 feet, 500 feet to the 300 feet. How does that, I had to recuse myself from the Rosedale project because it was 500 feet.
Yeah, it doesn't affect that at all. It's completely different issues
Okay.
about conflicts of interest.
Okay.
versus
All
notice.
right. All right. And then the only other question I have, or the recommendation I have, or the suggestion I have is for action item 2. And we've spoken a little bit about, barriers to approval. One of them being excess signage and public input and whatnot. At some point, the public has a right to voice its opinion, whether it's the NIMBYs or the BIMBYs or whatever it is. They still have a democratic right to voice their opinion. And I think denying them that right, even though it's in conflict with state law, I think somewhere along the line here, we've got 1 to 10 units, 11 to 25 units. I would maintain that if you've got 11 to 25 units and you're getting a lot of pushback from the public, that it should come to the commission. Not that it's going to change anything, but it at least gives the public the right to vent.
What's a NIMBY?
Not in my backyard,
Oh,
not in my front yard,
Oh.
niffies, whatever, all of them. Now, I'm not prepared to make a motion on that or anything. I don't know if all of this is cast in stone right now. Something to think about. Right now it's director approved. And I don't know how you put a number on it, but if all of a sudden a project of 15 or 25 units comes to you and there's some sort of huge public outcry, if you can't make an exception to bring it to the commission.
So the 1 to 10 category, like you said, that's a building permit. So it's a building permit. 11 to 25 units will be noticed. So that will be 300 feet from wherever the project's occurring. I think as a practical matter, if, the director, it's not a public hearing, but we still adopt a resolution with conditions of approval like the commission would. It's a director's resolution. If there was a major issue that was unable to be resolved at that level, major opposition for a legitimate reason, not just because, I don't like it, then I think the director has the discretion in the code to refer any item or any decision to the commission if he or she determines that's the case. So I or my future person sitting here can always do that as well. I would also say that part of this streamlining, this is one piece, and there are many pieces that we're going to be bringing to you to adopt in the, not too distant future in 2024. You'll remember one of the things we're doing is adopting objective design guidelines. That's also part of the state. The state's trying to remove discretion from land use, from development decisions, especially for items that meet whatever the codes the city has adopted. So we're also hopefully to address, most of the things that come up during the hearing process. We're adopting objective design standards as well that will help, streamline that versus, rather than having, groups of individuals sort of wring their hands and try to make, judgment calls over whether, they like it, they don't like it, if it's too high, too short, remove this tree, save that tree. They want you to make it, more, routine. You're sort of checking boxes is too simple, but that's essentially what you do. It's a very complex list of boxes to check to develop anything. And the effort is to sort of, whenever you have hearings and things, the issues that are brought up oftentimes, don't necessarily relate to a code issue or making findings of fact, or is it or not consistent with the general plan. It's how people feel about things. And I understand the need for people to get that off their chest. You still have that opportunity to do that over 11 units, 11 to 25. And like I said, if it's something really controversial, I think a director would refer it to the commission.
One thing I'd like to add to that too, about the objective design standards that we're currently working on with the consultant, which those will be coming to Planning Commission. Those will go through a public process with the public being allowed to provide, ample opportunity to provide feedback, surveys, things like that, including the Planning Commission, City Council, and staff's input too. And So that's the time to sort of say, hey, these are the things we really care about architecturally. This is how we want a 1 to 10 unit complex or development to look, feel, what kind of details we want, what kind of amenities we think it needs to have per unit, that sort of stuff. And we'll work through that for all development types. And so there is that public input in the standards that will then regulate all these different development types, whether they be a discretionary or non-discretionary permit. And that applies to the ADUs and SB9 units too. They'll be covered by this too.
And I get all that. I guess I'm just seeing 1 to 10 units. I get that. It's just a building permit. And I'm kind of splitting the difference here as opposed to the 26 plus units where it definitely comes to us. The middle one, and it says here discretionary application with mailed notices. I'd like to see that discretionary to come to the commission as well, if not necessarily for us to make changes, but to give the public another opportunity to possibly get it off their chest, like you said. That's all I have.
Can I make another comment?
I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Vice Chair Favor.
Okay, a lot of work. Thank you very much. I know this got approved before me or Tim were on here, so we're just kind of coming into it. So definitely a lot of work and looks pretty great. I think I'll just follow up on that too, because on the 11 to 25 units, it's still the citizens have a right to come in for public comment to talk about it, even if it doesn't go to commission. So it seems like any citizen could still come in and Jeff can do his job on his own. And if they really care, they could show up for the first part of the meeting, right? And voice it. And then we could hear their comments. So I think my other comments I'm just going to go with good. So great job. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Koss.
Yeah, I was just responding to Commissioner Davis in terms of his concern. I understand. I think I agree that the public always has the beginning of this meeting, when we open public comment to make. But I think if we have them come back to voice their concerns about something that they have absolutely no control over, then it's like, well, you asked my opinion and then you ignored it, right? So I feel like that would be counterproductive to have people come in and say, well, tell us what you think about this project. But, oh, by the way, it doesn't really matter what you think because the project has to be approved anyway. And so I think that might be somewhat, counterproductive. And in my opinion, as a citizen, if I went in to give my opinion on something and I knew it was a moot point, that would almost anger me because
right. It's not exactly a moot point. If they come in and make objections and there's lots of public comment about it, then Jeff can refer the matter to the commission and have the commission consider it.
Right. But I was talking about when he was saying open, allowing the 11 to 25 to come into public to make a comment at the planning commission, even though it would be kind of a done deal. I was just saying that to me, that seems counterproductive because why ask the public come in and give us your opinion and it's already a done deal. So it's,
No, and I really,
yeah.
if I'm sitting there as the one who's sort of reviewing what the comments are, it's sort of like I'm acting like a judge in a courtroom essentially, right? So I'm really focusing on, when people do object to things, because this happens on a fairly regular basis, right? There's, on a regular basis, on a daily basis in the community development department, somebody might be complaining about the height of a neighbor's fence or what they're doing in their backyard or, any number of things that we get involved with. And so this would be something similar. So what I would be looking for and really in the comments is like, okay, are the objections that they have relevant to, the analysis of the project? Are they not meeting a particular standard? Or is this not consistent with the general plan in some way? Is it falling short of the bar that the city has set for itself with respect to development? And so I think, hopefully we're able to kind of sift that out, and that if there are really legitimate and most of the time a developer will, especially if you've got something you can point to the code or point to a policy or an actual impact of the project that's not being fully addressed. 9 times out of 10, a competent and respectable builder is going to work to address that and make the neighbors happy. They don't, we don't it's rare. It just doesn't happen that developers are that aggressive trying to ram something through.
Okay, great. I just kind of wanted to mention that, but I think they always have, like you said, the beginning public comment portion of the meeting to make comments too. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that comment.
Okay, so my question on action number 2, we've talked about it, but as it stands now, anything from 1 to 10 units would still come to the planning commission as it stands now, or no?
Oh, under the current code, yes, but you know, at this point, assuming this gets a recommendation tonight, and it'll go to council in December, so 30 days after the second. So as of February or something, it won't. So
Okay.
under today's code, yes. In about 3 months, no.
And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but all of this would be subject to notifications, or just the 11 to 25 units?
Just the discretionary ones, which are the 11 and up. Hence that 11 number in the signage section, the action item related to signage.
Okay.
So yeah, no
And-
noticing for 1 to 10.
And let's say someone came in, I mean, at least in my 6 or 7 years here, there has been very few cookie cutter, just check all the boxes without some kind of request of a variance of something to do with the general plan or whatever. Anything, regardless if it's 1 to 26, if there's something that would change, they're requesting something that's different from the general plan or specific of a variance, so that would that trigger it to the point where it would come to the planning commission?
Absolutely, yes. This is for code compliant, general plan compliant projects. So if somebody's requesting a rezone or a general plan amendment or a variance or conditional use permit or some other permit
I mean,
or a map.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
you're-
it's a pretty tight
That's,
check.
that's
the box.
automatically coming to the commission.
Yeah.
Cutter stuff here.
Right.
It's a
and-
different type of
And
application.
yeah, right. And likewise, in the hillside, this doesn't affect the grading threshold. Like because that's really what affects hillside development is grading quantities. So if you're doing, how we see Gordon Highlands or other custom homes, if you're tripping the grading quantity minute, you're still going to come to the commission.
Okay. So I mean, it's a pretty small
Right. So really,
window of folks that it's got to meet everything that's within the ordinance for from 1 to 10 to just go to a building permit and to be discretionary for the planning director.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so you can't issue a variance.
No.
no.
My thinking
Yeah.
on what I was talking
But
about.
like, if you have an apartment complex and we want to do a 25 unit apartment complex, it would need a map, Let's say it was code compliant. It would be a director level.
Listen, I have no problem with that. If it's code compliant and it's checking all the boxes and there's nothing, I'm not going to sit here and say that what we have as an ordinance or a code, whether it's local or state, doesn't say, yeah, I could disagree with it, but why have the ordinance or the code?
Right. And as we start doing this, I think it's fair to let the commission know, as part of our regular reports, the type of applications that we're processing, that maybe that the commission saw, that just so you're up to date on what's going on in the community, those types of things, so we can, monitor that at the very least. So.
And of these, and I probably should know more about it being on here for a while, but when it triggers something with CEQA and you have to do negative impacts, and does that trigger stuff to the planning commission, or is that something that falls within the codes and ordinances that you have discretionary?
So
on?
under the 11 to 25, the director would be the one approving the CEQA document. So if you did have to do a negative declaration or a mitigated negative declaration for that, for code compliant, but I would be the one who then approved the CEQA document.
All right, well, that because I imagine there are cookie cutter stuff that comes through and that gets approved administratively at the desk, and there are things that, even if it's a remodel of a home, that triggers something that hey, you know what, this is outside of what we do, this is gonna go to a planning commission and
Sure.
stuff.
Even
like
if
that.
a single family home addition required a variance, it would come to the commission.
Okay. There was one other, and forgive me for, all right, action number 9. I'm a little confused on currently a variety of side and rear setbacks from 5 feet to 7 feet to 20 feet to 35 feet. Tell me what action 9 does exactly, because I'm a little confused on the language that's there.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad we came back to this slide because I anticipated this to be kind of a conversation piece. So right now the Glendora code has, depending on your zoning district and what you're doing on it, has a variety of different setbacks, and it's kind of complicated. So setbacks are the distance from the property line that is something can be built or extend. And so this applies to the side and rear setbacks. So side yard, rear yard. It can be 5 feet to 7 feet on the side setback for a single family house, depending on its zone classification. And the rear setback can range from 20 feet to 35 feet, depending which zone that single family house is in. What single family zone it's in. Adding some complication to that. We have different setbacks for ADUs and SB9 units, which are provided by the state. They say we can't require a bigger side or rear setback than 4 feet. So this creates kind of what we were talking about earlier, sort of detached structures, attached structures, whichever. And this creates kind of an unfair burden to the homeowner who wants to do a home addition or something where, they can't extend their home to within, maybe 35 feet of the property line. But the person next door, or if they wanted to, could build an SB9 secondary unit or an attached ADU or detached building up to 1,000 square feet right up to that 4-foot line. So it makes it very complicated when we get, I was actually just looking at one with Mark the other day at the counter where, it's not just an ADU, but it's a garage and it's the home's getting extended and then there's an ADU and we've got all these different setbacks that we're applying. So what this does, and it was in the commitments made in the housing element, was to just put sort of a universal 4-foot side and rear yard setback on single family residential property. That applies to the house, the ADU, SB9 secondary unit, and in some of our future stuff we're working on, we're interested in maybe unifying that as more. But for this case, it's revising multiple sections of the code to sort of standardize side and rear setbacks, which makes it, it's more efficient. I can say that, and easier to communicate and understand for customers too.
So basically what you're saying is that we're going to adopt what the state has adopted for ADU setbacks for our side and rear setbacks.
Correct. And this code
uniform, because it makes sense. I mean, I can't do a home addition and I've got to be 20 feet, but he can build an ADU within 4 feet. So, I may not be thrilled with it, but I like the uniformity of it.
That's great. That's a good observation. And, I do want to point out that with this code update, this isn't going to apply to second story setbacks. Those would still stay to whatever the underlying zoning district is. So 7 feet or 5 feet or 20 or 35, from 20 to 35 from the rear property line. Unless, there's this new state law that ADUs that are attached can be second story. If it was an attached ADU, it could be 4 feet in second story. But this code update doesn't really get into that nuance. Future ones will.
So, I mean, I know I'm going on a rabbit hole, but an attached ADU going to a second story, it still has to meet the minimum square feet. It can't go above the 1,000 square feet that's allowed, or
exactly. It has to meet the area.
It has to be a little skinny, a smaller, taller unit.
Well, some of our older homes in Glendora are they're only about 1,000 square feet, 900. I mean, I saw one for sale. It was like it's 900 something square feet. So in that case, the whole second floor of the house could be an ADU.
Right.
It'd be just a 2-story house at that point.
Okay. I think that's all I have. And the last thing, and when we sat through that 2022 meeting, if I recall, and maybe you guys can chime in on this, but a lot of this was kind of, because we were going back and forth with the state, and a lot of this was like give and take of language and things they were looking for for the arena. And I know there was, definitely different opinions, not just with us, but with city council on what they would live with and what they wouldn't live with. But this was a lot of negotiation and give and take with the state, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's correct. And also some of the things that we came up with were rejected by the commission and the council on, I think we had nearly 40 originally, or maybe about 36, 37. So about 7 or 8 of them were not accepted by the commission and council at that meeting. But what we're presenting tonight is what was accepted, and then we're put into the housing element as what
So
we're going
this
to do.
was accepted by the state in.
Yes, yeah, this is-
We are going through or have met the process for
Right.
our arena for whatever the 2022 to 29 or whatever the dates were.
Correct. And after that meeting, as part of this, all of these items made that into the housing element and was then, approved, adopted by the city council. And then ultimately it was certified by the state.
Okay. Well, based on that, I think you guys did an amazing job. The fact that I do talk to a lot of folks in different jurisdictions and listening to their trials and tribulations that they're still going through and the amount of money that their municipalities are spending for legal fights and things like that. We may not agree with all of it, but I think overall, if other agencies and municipalities are looking at us as a model of what the policy is and what we've done, then not just to you guys, but to this commission and the city council, I think that we've done a pretty amazing job to where we're at today. So that's my 2 cents on it. So with that, unless there's any other comments or questions from the commission, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and request a motion.
Make a motion.
I'm going to read the motion real quick, and then we're going to adopt an ordinance entitled an ordinance of the city council. We're recommending, let me start over here. We're recommending an ordinance to the city council of the city of Glendora, California, amending certain sections of Title 20 subdivisions, Title 21 zoning of the Glendora Municipal Code in order to implement various housing production actions from the 6th RENA cycle from 2021 to 29. General plan housing element project PLN 23-0016. And with that, we've read it in, and now I'm looking for a motion.
Motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Vice Chair Faber, second by Commissioner Koss, and we'll go to roll call.
Commissioner Crimmins,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Cost,
Yes.
Vice Chair Faber,
Yes.
Chair Norwood,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Okay, we're gonna go to items on the consent calendar be enacted by one motion without an individual discussion. And unless Commissioner has requested to be removed for separate discussion, does anyone wish to pull anything on the consent calendar? And the only thing on the consent calendar, right, we have is a firm minutes from October 2nd, 2023 regular meeting. So I'll take a motion on affirming the minutes from October 2nd, 2023.
I'll move.
I'll second.
So first by Commissioner Koss and a second by Commissioner Crimmins, and a roll call, please.
Commissioner Crimmins,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Abstain, I wasn't here.
Commissioner Cost,
Yes.
Vice Chair Faber,
Yes.
Chair Norwood,
Yes.
motion carries 4-1.
Okay, so right now I'm going to invite any commissioners to give closing comments if they wish. Anyone?
I may have a,
Chair Faber?
yep, I may have a conflict in the December meeting, so just wanted to make sure this is where, but
Just thank you guys for the work on this. You can tell a lot of time and energy went into it. So thank you.
I second that. I was at the meeting where we kind of went through all these things and it was a lot, and you've really done a good job just fleshing it all out and making it make sense. So I appreciate that hard work.
Yeah, and I'll dovetail on that as well. It's a lot of hard work. And then just a reminder, holiday stroll on the 17th. Be there, be square.
Okay, any
Very fun.
closing comments from staff?
I just have a note that I'll be sending everybody out an email probably tomorrow asking your availability for a special meeting on January 16th, since the first meeting in January, our regularly scheduled meeting will be January 2nd, which will be closed for the holiday. So it does look like we will have agenda items for that meeting for that to be requested. So respond to me, let me know if we have a quorum or not for that.
Okay,
And then just also remind you to look for that email that Jeff sent to everybody about the Planning Commissioners Academy and see if interest on that.
Is that something that we can all attend? Or is it limited to a certain amount?
If we have the budget, I think actually if all the commissioners want to attend, I think we can accommodate that. Yes. And it's in Long Beach.
Certainly been enough change in
Yeah,
I think it's.
the housing. Well,
So for my comments, I did send all of the commissioners, for those who are new, the League of California Cities has a Planning Commissioners Academy, and it's really a group of really seminars, sessions. You get to meet other commissioners from throughout the state of California. You learn about being a commissioner and the responsibilities of it and all of those things. And a couple of years ago, Commissioners Davis and Koss went to it, and I think a lot out of it.
Yes.
Happy to hear if you want to share what, as your closing comments, your experience, but I'd encourage you, especially since it's close, it only happens every other year it's in March. So if you could send me your availability, if you are available, and then I can register you for that.
I went and I know Commissioner Davis went, and it was great. We were pretty new. It was before COVID shut down and everything, but it was really nice to meet other people and see what was going on in other cities and how what they were doing compared to us. And then there was a lot of workshops about just some of the terminology that we hear and explaining what RENA was, all those kinds of things. So I found it extremely beneficial.
as did I.
if you could resend that email, I think that,
I will do that.
yeah,
I'll resend it.
okay.
Got my reply already.
So with that, yeah, it'll be interesting in the next few years, and we'll have to have meetings almost every other month because it sounds like nothing will be on the agenda anymore. But oh, that's fun. I'm looking forward to that.
Variance is never
Yeah, well, I know.
There's always
With that,
variances.
unless there's anything else, we're gonna go ahead and adjourn at 8:21.